righty, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow auto enthusiasts and people who like podcast nonsense, no matter where you are in the world, you've chosen once again to hit the play button on yet another...
A Hygge episode of V8 Radio, Kevin.
I'm sorry, a what?
Hygge. It is actually a Danish word, and it means a feeling of well-being or contentment, and it's more like a facet of their culture, of the Danish culture.
There's a whole facet of hygges running around?
Yes.
I thought you were trying to do like an old car horn. an auga horn.
Auga. Maybe that's where they got the word from, because it's so pleasing.
The Danes probably think those cars are very cheery.
Probably. Could be.
Well, it's a very special episode because you get more than you bargained for at the same price, because it is not just myself, Kevin Oeste, and our esteemed co-host, Mr. Mike Huball Clarke. We're also joined by Mr. Trevor Spence, technician at the V8 Speed and Resto shop. Welcome to the show, Trevor.
Hi. So we're down a listener since I'm here.
Yes, well, that's what was the chatter before the show, is that Trevor was always referred to as the listener.
He's the original listener.
We've got a handful now, so without you, we're down to, 3 fingers, I guess. And Trevor, you've heard this show before and know some of our traditions. For those who haven't, we like to start each episode, because this is an automotive type show to some degree. We started off with an automotive trivia question, and guests are not immune.
That's right, man.
So, being our guest, Trevor, we're going to ask you to go first. Did you prepare a trivia question for this fine episode?
Oh, I did. I've been preparing since I heard I was going to be on at the end of the last episode.
Oh, gee whiz. I can't wait for this.
I told you not to ask.
All right, so since I'm not on here a lot, I guess mine's a little more complicated than usual. I got 2 parts and a bonus.
Good God.
Oh, wow.
We only have an hour.
Well, I mean, we can have another guest episode to explain it later.
Right on.
Well, I think what we need to do is ask our friend Yardley to pull over for a minute and bust out the spreadsheet.
Right on. Absolutely.
Because this is a 2-parter A and B with a bonus. You're going to add another column.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. What was the first American manufacturer to offer front-wheel drive? In what year, also? And then the bonus is, what else was this auto manufacturer first to do in the United States?
Oh, man. And not only is it a 2-parter, it's 2 firsts.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Trevor.
Yeah, well, see, now, technically, because in the beginning of this, I claim to be the host, I will be a gracious host and allow Mike to answer first.
Oh, you're the nicest guy ever. All right, so who was the first American auto manufacturer to offer front-wheel drive, and what else were they first to do?
And what year was
what year?
2 parts
Right. Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna say it was. And I know this is wrong. I'm gonna say General Motors on the Olds Tornado as well as the Cadillac Eldorado, 1967. And what else were they the first to do?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's code for absolutely wrong.
No. I'm taking interest.
Yes.
I'm riveted.
What were they the first to do? They were the first to use front disc brakes on their cars. Again, wrong, but that's my guess. Kevin?
Okay.
Back to you.
All right. I've got yours written down.
All right.
There's a great trivia question about that Olds Tornado, the front drive car that Mike suggested to be the first American produced front-wheel drive vehicle. And the trivia question there is, what was that supposed to be called before it was the Tornado?
Ooh.
But we'll save that for later.
Thanks. I'm going to do some Google searching on that.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so first front, I'm going to say it was the 1937 Cord.
Ooh, nice guess.
Yeah, that's my guess. Often, and that's the coffin nose, right? The Cord.
That car is referred to as the coffin nose. That's correct.
It's the first car to be called the coffin nose. I
win! Winner, chicken dinner.
All right. So I don't remember what the model number of that was. I'm only familiar with like the Cord 812 and like the Cord. There was a Speedster, but the coffin nose, popular vernacular. That's my guess for the first front drive. As far as I would say the Cord company, was it Auburn Cord at that point? I don't know. So what else did they do? This was in the 30s. I'm just going to do a wag here and say they were the... I got it. They were the first supercharged American car.
Playing off of some of last week's trivia.
Yeah. How about that?
All right.
I'd like to change my guess, please. Oh, brother. All right. Well, that was fabulous, Trevor. Thank you for that. Those riveting questions.
It's your turn to stump me.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a softball in comparison.
I can make it count while I'm here, right?
Yeah. All right, boys. All right, we're going to talk about fuel injection and more specifically the differences between gas direct injected engines and port fuel injected engines, and why is the engine that uses gasoline direct injected engine require so much higher fuel pressures than the tuned port injected engine.
All right, so who's going first?
I'm going to be a gracious host.
Yeah,
I'm going to say Mr. Trevor will go first.
All right, so the question was, why does direct injection require more fuel pressure than port injection?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Quite a bit more.
All right, so a lot of the magic of direct injection is because you're putting the fuel right into the cylinder. Part of when you do that is actually during the compression stroke. And for a variety of reasons. Number one is when you do it during the compression stroke, you can time when the fuel comes in, and therefore you can have higher compression, higher cylinder temperature, and be less likely to detonate if you're having the fuel in there with less time to get hot. But because of that, when you're on the compression stroke, you have a lot of pressure in the cylinder already. So in order to get the fuel in there and atomize it, you got to have more pressure from the direct injector, whereas port injector, you're really just looking for enough pressure to atomize fuel and get it out the nozzle towards the valve, and then the vacuum or the intake stroke is what pulls the fuel in.
An interesting take. Kevin?
Yeah, what a bunch of nonsense that was. Man, somebody wake me up over here. Well, that is a great synopsis. And what happens if I just say I agree with that? Because... Mikey, the question that you chose to pose at this specific time is relevant because Trevor's been playing quite a bit with direct injected engines in the shop. In fact, that LT4 Camaro we've been playing with, that's a direct injected engine. And we've been discussing the needs of that high pressure fuel system. And I remember way back when we started looking at that car, I was doing some research because I had that same question. So it was a very organic question. What's the deal with all this pressure? And the term or the analogy is also how a diesel engine does the same thing. Diesel engines require quite a bit of fuel pressure. So if you're going to start off your Duramax or your Cummins diesel, they've got very high pressures as well. So, but what Trevor said, I think is completely right. You're going to shoot this stuff when everything is trying to get out of the cylinder. You're trying to stuff things in. So I agree. We've never had this situation.
That you've agreed with Trevor?
No, we've had that a lot. No, I was saying here on the show where two people agree on the trivia question because we've only had a couple guests in the past. So I'm
All right.
I'm gonna stick with it.
All right. Duly noted, boys.
So if Trevor and I both win, we get to split the prize.
I think there's one dilly bar left in the shop freezer.
Oh yeah, well you can have that. You heard it. I'll just sing "Nothing from Nothing Leaves Nothing."
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Satisfied with all that?
Yeah, I like it. Good answers.
All right. So I have also prepared a trivia question. Yeah, and this one it's a little more vague than both of those, but it kind of delves back into American car history, and over the years there have been certain families that owned or started or ran automobile or parts companies in the U.S. So the most obvious one would be the Ford family. Henry Ford started it, his son, Edsel and Henry II and Edsel II and Henry III and all the rest of them continue on. And that's kind of a vertical format. But there was times when there was siblings that ran car companies. So as I'm saying this, I'm debating how much of a JO do I want to be on this question?
Why hold back now, baby? Why hold back now?
Well, this is super trivial. So
Oh, boy.
I will say that I'm aware of two sets of siblings that ran car companies, and I will allow either one of those sets.
Okay.
One being a pair of brothers, another being three brothers. So, Mike, any idea of two brothers or three brothers that owned and operated a car company in the United States?
I do have an idea of a set of brothers that owned and operated a car company in the United States, and I believe that would be the Dodge brothers.
Ooh,
nice question. Who actually happened to have worked for the Ford Motor Company before they struck out on their own.
they struck out.
Struck out on their own.
Do you want to take a whack at the three
Oh,
for a bonus for column C of our spreadsheet?
The three brothers. American car company or any car company?
American car company.
Okay. Oh gosh, man. I'll give a wag and say, and I think this is totally wrong, but I don't want to say AMC. I'll just say Tucker.
The infamous Tucker brothers.
The infamous Tucker brothers. Absolutely, that's right.
All
right. Don't judge me.
That was a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. It's hard, you need to not say, and I know this is wrong every time.
Yeah.
Because the presentation helps,
Well, on that part, I'm right.
Well, that's a good point. All right, Mr. Trevor Spence, I pose the same question to you.
All right, so I got a three brothers that I don't know if you thought of, but when Mike said Dodge brothers, I went to the Graham brothers. There's a lot of history there, but we'll get into where those are related a little bit. The Graham brothers actually started the Dodge Brothers truck business by modifying Dodge cars, and then they ultimately sold that back to them and went to start their own car company. And then I'm going to go again to last week. I'm going to say Fred and August Duesenberg for two brothers.
That's a doozy of an answer.
That sure is. Very good. That means twice I have to spell this in my notes.
Oh, boy.
All right. Duly noted.
Right on.
Also, the Graham Brothers logo had three faces on it for a while.
Manny, Mo, and Jack?
Yeah.
I don't
Thank
remember
you.
the Graham Brothers' names.
Maybe that's the trivia question.
Yeah, right?
All right. Well, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to have a different perspective on the trivia question, so that was good. And you'll have to wait till the end of the show. This is kind of what we do. We tease people because I could tell. I can hear them gripping, in anticipation to figure out what were the names of the infamous Tucker brothers later on in the show.
All right.
And we're going to shift gears a little bit and go from automotive trivia to Trevia.
Trivia. Yeah, we're going to need a full first and last name, Mr. Spence.
Oh, you want my legal name?
Yeah, absolutely. We all want it.
This is something that he hadn't revealed to even his coworkers for many years. So you sure you can handle
some
all
knew. It wasn't everybody. Some knew. Heck, there was actually. We'll go to my wedding for a minute. There were some people that didn't know in my extended family, particularly my bride Trisha's family, until wedding day because it was printed on the program, but it didn't fit on the invitation. And plus, we wanted people to know whose wedding it was. So my real first name is actually Trevelyan.
That's a strong, great first name.
It is.
I love it.
And as an adult, I'm all right with it. As a kid, it wasn't a lot of fun because most of my teachers couldn't pronounce it. So especially like the first day of class, I'd be, they'd go through the list: Billy, Susie, Jane, and there'd be this long pause.
Trevor just raised his hand here.
Mr. Spence. So right. By the time college rolled around, that was the point of raising my hand. Yep, I'm here. Call me Trevor.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and then obviously my last name's not near as exciting.
But great nonetheless.
That was something that I didn't think I knew the first couple of years that you had worked with us.
To that point, obviously a long time ago. Well, I've been at the V8 Speed and Resto shop almost 9 years, so some listeners have more context. Way back when I applied for the job here, obviously Kelly got my full name for the legal documentation stuff, but I went by Trevor. So it actually, the first couple of years I worked here, I had some minor issues with my taxes because she was writing my paychecks and sending my tax information in under Trevor, which is a person who doesn't exist with my social security number.
Nice, man. And it only took you a couple of years to straighten that out. So that's good.
Well, because I'd go in her office, like, hey, I noticed that this is not actually my name on here. And she would write it down on a notepad, and then, I wouldn't think anything else of it until tax time next year. So.
Oh, boy. Oh, wow.
The infamous Kelly notepads, by the way.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're yellow legal pads, and she writes lots of things on them.
Now, Trevor, when you started at the shop, was it the shop at its current location, or was it at the farm?
No, it was at the farm.
Right on.
Yeah, we the whole farm shop would probably fit in the room I work in now in the current location.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 20 by 30, maybe, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we could kind of work on like 2 cars, 3 if one was like halfway under the one on the lift, and there are times where on nice days, like a day like today was, somebody worked outside. It was just easier for everybody that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it is pretty remarkable to think back and think of what you guys were able to do and what we were all able to do in that small space initially, because I don't even know how many cars we have in our shop space today, but it was a vastly different environment when Trevor started. And Trevor joined the team way early on when we first actually started to hire people, because like the very beginning was Kelly and I, because it was kind of our deal. Kelly's brother John, who is a body technician who would basically do overnights and evenings with us, and then anybody else we could grab to come by and help out, and things started to get a little more serious and require some more expertise and more capabilities. So Kelly's like, we need to hire a mechanic. And I'm like, where the heck are we going to do that? I mean, we're on this family-owned farm little spot that wasn't accessible to the public and didn't have a sign out in front. And, it was basically completely off the grid, primarily by design by Kelly's dad who owned the property. And she's like, well, I'll do this. I'll put an ad out. And if you remember, Trevor, of course you remember this, but the job interview didn't even happen on site. It happened at a sandwich shop.
It did.
Nice. Nice.
A sandwich shop, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, and it's kind of depressing.
Oh,
it is. We miss that shop.
Yeah, I met Kelly in the city of Waterloo, and at what was then the Subliminal Sandwich Shop, and sat in a booth. And the interview questions she asked me was, I have these parts. I think it was parts to do like a brake job. And she said, what am I missing? And later on, she told me it's because I asked for the grease and the cotter pin that we're missing.
That clinched it, huh? Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Trevor's obviously a very detail-oriented guy, and he thinks things out, and that was crucially important, And in our case, even today, when you're building a custom car, you don't always have the luxury of a manual or a plan or something that has very detailed step-by-step instructions. We rely on the team to be constructively creative and engineer things along the way. So they need to be aware of what they're working on and what it bolts to and what that bolts to and serviceability and all the rest. And that's still a challenge in many ways because, sometimes one department will work on something and not put enough consideration for the next department that, might be installing it or painting it or whatever. So we really try to work together on that. And, it's that classic old question, what comes first? And she'd interviewed a couple people and she's like, so what do you do first on a brake job? And they're like, we put brake pads on. And she's like, how about you get out of the car? So Trevor was able to, and I think Trevor was able to, vocalize those details because he's been through these type of questions with his previous manager training. Did you know that Trevor had previous management training before he came to work with us?
I was not aware of this. Do tell.
Well, it starts when I was in college. I was working at a Walmart tire shop, which I was doing to get through and pay what bills I had. And I had already been restoring cars with my dad when I was a kid, and I had done like a work study program in high school at a general repair shop. So I was a little overqualified to be changing tires and oil at that point. So pretty quickly I got to be the manager of the tire shop at the Walmart. And then what I went to college for, which incidentally was criminal justice, wasn't panning out. And coincidentally, they thought I was pretty good at managing tire shops, so we'll let him see if he can be an assistant store manager. I did that for a couple of years.
Moving on up.
Yeah, man.
And I probably could have stuck with it and been a store manager, but I honestly hated it. And I think a lot of it was the store and the store manager I had in hindsight, because I got banished to overnights, which is something that happens in a bad store when you're the manager who gets things done, because the overnight crew typically doesn't get stuff done. And that was it for me. I did about a year on overnights, and I was ready to do anything but work at a store. I almost changed.
Precisely when we found him, he's ready to do anything. And we're like, okay.
Buddy, we have got a job for you.
We've got anything for you, pal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I even told Kevin this. I actually had a job lined up to go be a truck driver, take truck driving training, because I was so fed up with that. But fortunately, I came here instead, because I probably would have hated that too.
Well, we're certainly glad that you came to join us at the team, because you had an interesting start. I think we kind of threw you right in the fire, and we put some trust into your interview process, and we had to get some stuff done. So, those first few days were kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah.
But successful.
Yeah, my first task was on a 69 Camaro that Kevin drove from I didn't even know where at the time. I show up at work. Kelly shows me around the farm shop where things are, including the blackberry patch that you snacked on your way to or from picking up parts from storage.
Nice.
That's right.
Nice.
Kevin shows up in this orange 69 Camaro and says, so we're going to do a top end swap, and we're going to do a brake upgrade, and you're going to be filmed doing that. First go. And we're going to take the engine out because we're going to paint it too. So have fun.
Right
and
on.
then he leaves.
I got to go get some blackberries.
Well, yeah, I had to go play with the goat or something.
Right.
And then Kelly actually filmed me that day, because we didn't even have a full-time camera guy back then. Because that was when we had Mark, but he was part-time.
Yep, yep. He and I were trading off those responsibilities, and back in those days, VATV, the television show, had existed for a while already, but I was the sole production person at that point. So I was shooting all the video, and Kelly would jump in on occasion, and then I would edit that stuff off site at our home office. So half the time I was at home, and the other half I was at the shop. And I figured, well, you're this is why you're here, so go to town.
Nice.
And did a great job.
That's awesome. So, Trevor, how has your role evolved since the time you started till now?
Well, so when I started, I was the mechanic, and the crew was pretty small at the time. There was me, Nathan, who was our painter and body man back then, Nick, who was our fabricator, and Kevin and Kelly, and then occasionally there was some high school, college age kids that seemed to filter through doing some prep work and cleanup work. And then now we got officially 4 mechanics, and then we got one guy who's sort of jack of all trades, John, who does some mechanic work. And I wouldn't say I'm like in charge of anybody, but I've been here the longest, and out of everybody on the team, I have a lot of experience building custom cars and restoring cars.
Mm-hmm.
So
people tend to defer to you on things.
I'm a guiding light in ways. Right on. If there's questions on how to do something or what would look best, and especially if Kevin and Kelly aren't on premises to ask those questions, I kind of have a feel for what the company standard and expectations are in those cases. And
cool. I've
dealt with a lot of things, so I have a pretty broad experience on stuff. Like I was saying earlier, I restored cars with my dad when I was a kid, and he was really into the 30s cars. So got a lot of experience on flathead and points and kingpins and
cool,
stuff that is basic, but not stuff that your average automotive technician runs into anymore because it's just not used.
So, and that's what I think is always fun is when somebody brings us a car. So right now we've got a 40 Cadillac in the shop. We've got a 30 Ford Model A hot rod. And, we get these older cars in and people just can't take them anywhere else because nobody understands how this stuff works anymore. You can't go to a general repair shop today and say, put kingpins in my we got a 58 Chevy truck sitting there. Yeah. And, even that thing is beyond. But I always think it's fun when you tell somebody on the phone that, yeah, we've got a couple of people with a lot of experience, between Trevor and Mike. And a lot of times they expect that we're going to break out the real old guy
right.
to do those, older technologies. We bring Trevor out and, the guy, what are you, barely 31, 30?
32 actually.
32. See,
jeez.
And they're like, so where's the guy? And Mike is our senior technician in experience and age, and he's good at that stuff too. But between Trevor and Mike, I don't think there's any old system that we can't fix. And what I thought was really cool is every once in a while I'll hear Trevor telling stories to a customer about stuff he's worked on, because people don't just relinquish control of their classic vehicle. You got to qualify yourself a little bit.
Exactly.
And every once in a while I hear Trevor telling the story of the automatic stick shift thing in what was it, the Hudson or the Graham? What was this car that you built when you were like 12?
So one of the cars my dad had was a 37 Hudson Terraplane pickup. And Terraplane was like a junior make to Hudson, similar to the Cadillac and LaSalle concept, or the Chrysler and DeSoto concept. So it wasn't necessarily a cheap car, but it was cheaper than a Hudson, which was like a mid-price car.
All right.
Generally. And at the time, it was pretty common to take basically a sedan and make it a pickup truck. So it shared all the front sheet metal and the drivetrain and all that. And
one of the options, Terra Camino.
Kind of, yeah.
The Terra Ranchero.
So one of the options on that was called the Electric Hand, was the marketing name that Hudson used. But it was a system that Bendix developed that was an electric vacuum shift mechanism, which incidentally was used on quite a few cars during that era because the ideal thing a lot of manufacturers want to do was create an automatic transmission, and not everybody had the engineering money to throw at that, especially the smaller companies. So basically, the system used vacuum cylinders and pretty basic switches and linkages and bell cranks and a mess of stuff to make the clutch operate automatically, which worked well in the Hudson because it's a wet clutch, similar to a motorcycle. So it's super easy to slip. So a machine can do it. It doesn't really need the finesse of a person. And then the shifting, again, was just vacuum cylinders. And it was really crude, but there weren't a whole lot of them that worked, at least as far as I knew from what my dad would tell me, which also kind of surprises me because going back to the trivia question, Kevin's answer, the Cord actually used the same system. So there's again, I don't know why. I don't know if it was just that Hudson people didn't have the resources, especially this is in the days before there was a whole lot of internet support. The internet was around, but it's not. This was before forums had really taken off a lot.
Well, you're talking about when
social media.
You're talking about when you were restoring this thing,
right?
It was before
when we were restoring this
when
thing.
they built these things in the 30s, long before the internet.
So getting information to work on stuff was far more difficult then than it is now.
Right.
So anyway, we got that thing to work, and that's just one of the things.
That's I think man. Those experiences not only taught you how to work on this stuff, but it also instilled almost kind of a mechanical fearlessness.
Yeah, you could say that.
And I think we still need that today, doing any of this stuff that we're working on right now. You're in the process of putting this brand new Ford 5.0 6-speed automatic into a 57 Thunderbird, and again, there's no manual for that, so you got to just kind of go for it and do it.
Well, I think there's about 8 pages of manual because we did this once before.
Yeah, you and again, but you did it the first time in our shop 7 years ago, 7 years ago, and didn't have anything. And obviously, you've learned from that knowledge gathering of going through the project. But it's fun for me to see how the team has evolved to be able to approach these type of things. Because every one of these engine transplants, we talked quite a bit about LS swaps last time, and those are getting easier and easier because companies are making parts to do that. But we're still doing a lot of stuff that parts are not made, and we're not building complete, race cars from tube chassis from nothing. We're generally taking a car that had something and we're putting something else in it, but we're real sticklers on making this stuff, function the way that, a modern manufacturer would want it to work, and people bring us cars all the time where they had somebody else do the engine swap, but it doesn't run or it dies at every stoplight or whatever. So there's a couple interesting things going on. One, so here we have a guy who's versed in this very rudimentary mechanical technology who's also doing a lot of our cutting edge stuff, which I think is pretty cool. And it's a great resource for the shop. And the other thing is that I think the team, and we mentioned this before too, the TV show House with the concept of the differential diagnosis, where you, I think the true definition of that is you're supposed to disagree with each other to land on the answer. That's why it's called differential. But,
right.
In our case, we do a lot of collaboration. And it's not just, I just took it apart and here's all the pieces on the floor. And now what? There's a strategy and a discipline. And, I think Trevor brings quite a bit to that. So the cars that we've been able to build, outside of the first couple, you've been there the whole time. So I think it's great that you've been able to contribute all that stuff and continue to grow and then share that with, other people that have joined the team.
Well, thanks. Well, and there's too many cars in the world. I can't fix them all by myself. So,
so
this is true.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question, Trevor. What do you think? What skill set did you bring with you that maybe wasn't well honed that you've really developed into something since joining the team?
I think the most apparent one to me is probably fuel injection tuning, because when I started here, I had tuned exactly one fuel-injected car. That was my own, which I drove to my second interview and showed Kevin. So I definitely, my orange Caprice. Actually, the proper name of that color was Malibu Sunset.
Ah,
nice.
I can taste it now.
Yeah, on a side story on that, I wanted to paint it C6 Corvette Atomic Orange, but when I did that car, I was a broke college kid. I didn't have any money, so I was actually one of the cheap base coat colors out of the Eastwood catalog at the time. So they might still make it. I don't know. I haven't looked in a while.
It's a pretty good color.
Yeah, I liked it. And it kind of fit. I think I like it more after I had it than Atomic Orange from C6 Corvette. But anyway, yeah, I think fuel injection is probably where I feel like I've learned and grown the most. And some of that has been, just doing it. And the technology, just in the time I've been here, has changed a whole lot. Because when we were doing the Reloaded Camaro back then, self-tuning fuel injection systems were pretty new, and by today's standards, really crude. And now the self-tuning stuff is a nice blend of self-tuning, but you can still get in there and finesse the details, because most of those things are getting stretched in a way by 600 horsepower, 500 cubic inch big blocks. They're geared towards a weekend guy with a more mild combination as far as fall out of the box and work perfectly. And we as an organization, we've been doing a lot with training. So Kelly has sent us to Holly fuel injection training. We've done the online training for a lot of the HP tuner stuff. And early on, we worked with some other tuners like Mike Norris. And Mike Norris actually helped us on the Silver LT4 Camaro that's on the cover. Because that was our first foray into that all. So it was nice to have a helping hand, because in some ways you can read a book a whole lot, but until you actually do it, it doesn't necessarily stick.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and there's been other training too, welding training and HVAC and all kinds of different stuff. But I think one of the things that differentiates our shop is that standard again, that we want this stuff to perform as best it can in all situations. So, a million years ago when I was at Hot Rod, the guys used to give the guys at CarCraft a bunch of crap because they would say, CarCraft, if it runs, it's tuned, and, again, you still see a lot of that. And we see people that bolt parts on a car, and just because they're stuck to the car doesn't mean they work together. And this is a source of Trevor and the other mechanics in the shop, a source of frustration for these guys day in and day out, because the parts choices are made sometimes with more emphasis on cheap rather than good and functioning, and then things aren't made to fit and work. So you spend quite a bit of your time when a car comes in. We got several right now that need help getting reworked, and unfortunately, that's time and money a customer has to spend. But if he wants to work right, it's got to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think two cars that are coming to mind that you're talking about. The one is a victim of time, because some of the stuff the customer bought it's not that old. And we're talking about some of the fuel injection stuff, again, it's 10 years old, but it's already outdated, and there's far better ways to do it now. But this is what he owns. This is what he's installed. So it's definitely a balance of, do we suggest to start over, or do we put time into what he's got? And then the other car is just, like Kevin was saying, poor part selection and reading the advertising line and more than the specs on some parts, like the stuff that makes you think you need this without any qualifications for what your car actually needs or what this part's really designed for.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand with our comment last time also about some of the Facebook groups and forums where it's like, you see these guys who are just trying to buy the biggest cam or the biggest carburetor they can because it sounds cool, and then they're upset that the car doesn't run right. And when we have the opportunity, like with this 57 Thunderbird that's in the shop, we had the opportunity to kind of spec most of the parts on that car with things that we were familiar with and things that we had good manufacturer relationships with. So most of that car has gone pretty smoothly. Now, there was a little bit of a hiccup in the chassis because we used the first time source for us on a chassis, but nobody builds off the shelf chassis for 57 Thunderbirds. There's like one or two guys, and we found the one, and he had a very attractive package, and the parts he was using were attractive to us, the coilover shocks and the brakes and all that stuff. But he left a little bit out of the description about how the body mounts and the bumpers mount. So, it came in, and Trevor's looking at it going, oh, this looks like it's going to fit great, except we need to put bumpers on this somehow.
Yeah. Well, and we also got a little learning on the nuances of first generation Thunderbirds too, because I called the manufacturer and said, "Hey, what's the deal with these two body mounts?" And he says, "Oh, well, we probably shouldn't have welded those quite all the way on there because we found they've been in like 3 different places, and I think what happened was." In 57, they had some leftover 56 parts, and they made some of them just work to get rid of them.
I got you.
Yeah, and that's something that nobody really knows until you get in it,
Yeah.
So you're always going to have those hot rodding moments. The trick is to minimize them and maximize that creative energy making the cool stuff, and not having to burn that energy and that time making basic stuff that somebody else overlooked, because that's when it gets frustrating. But you mentioned the cover car. So right now in the June 2020 Hemmings Muscle Machines magazine, on the cover is that silver LT4 69 Camaro that we didn't build the whole car. The car came to us as a complete show car. And then we were tasked with undoing it and redoing all the driveline in different stages without messing up the outside of the car. And that was a lot of challenges in that car. Some bolt-in parts, a Detroit Speed subframe that is designed for a 69 Camaro and bolts in, except this one had the RS nose with hidden headlights, and the customer wanted a dry sump oiling system. And, Trevor, you and Tyler had to figure out where to put the tank and how to plumb it and all that stuff. And there's lots of unknowns on that one.
That oil tank on that was definitely a team effort because I talked to actually Mark Steele a little bit because he's done this a lot, and he's a GM engineer. Because there's not, even though the LT4 has been out for years, there's still not a ton of information on some of this stuff, and even GM's instructions and their tech line, they didn't have a lot of information beyond use a dry sump tank. We're looking for how big should it be? Mm-hmm. How far away from the motor is okay? What's the lengths of lines?
Give me some specs here.
Right. So I talked to Steelo about it, and he builds cars that perform. He wins autocross events with his cars, and that helped us land on a volume for the tank. But then we had to figure out a place to fit it. So then myself and one of the fabricators, we measured our space, and I actually worked with Peterson Fluid Systems to design a custom built tank to fit in that space. But even then Tyler had to rework the mechanics of the headlight door and move the headlight motor from where it was, because it had Detroit Speed electric headlight conversion, which mounts an electric motor basically where the vacuum can used to be. And even though it's a lot smaller, it's exactly in the real estate we want for that oil tank. So Tyler actually engineered the stuff to move it up front, right behind the bumper, with new linkages to make it work.
Right on.
Completely not as intended.
Well, yeah, but again, that's hot rodding, and I think that particular car, the biggest frustration is also personally what I think is one of your biggest personal triumphs in figuring something out, and it's the habit of what the car was doing under acceleration and while shifting, which to this day I still think. You're probably about the only guy in the aftermarket that knows how to fix this thing. So we're kind of keeping it a little bit of a secret because we're not advertising and telling other people to do this just in case it doesn't work for them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be responsible for that.
We're calling our fix a beta right now. We've got 2 cars that work so far.
So, give us the short version of that one, of what the car was doing and your thought process to kind of bring this all around. Because I've talked about this on the show, but you did it.
Basically, when you drove the car aggressively, so it's a manual transmission car, not necessarily wide open throttle, but pretty deep into it. And if you pulled it up to say, it wasn't very specific, like I never nailed down exactly an RPM, but somewhere 4,000 plus, and you didn't pull it all the way to where the rev limiter was set, which I think was 6,600. So in that window, and you go shift, so say you were being moderately aggressive, you want to do your next shift at 5,000 RPM. Well, you'd step on the clutch, take your foot off the gas like you're supposed to, and the thing would wing up to the hard rev limit and then wind down, which is scary because you're not expecting it.
To say the least.
You're not in control.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds scary, like, is this going to come apart on me? Even though it probably won't. But the other thing that was frustrating about it is if you were able to shift fast enough, what would end up happening is it'd still be wound up when you go for the next gear, and it was jerky to drive. And to anybody bystanding, it's kind of embarrassing, probably. Like, look at that guy with his expensive car. He doesn't know how to drive it.
I remember my first stick shift.
Right. So basically what it came down to is from the get-go, I was pretty certain that it had to do with missing equipment. Because in the Camaro and the Corvette, there's a system called active rev match, where the ECM allows the driver to flip a switch, basically, and allow the car to manage the throttle between shifts. So when you're upshifting, you step on the clutch, you move the shifter, and then it brings the RPM down to the appropriate RPM. So when you let the clutch out, it's nice and smooth. And then where it's even more useful is on downshifts. So if you're driving aggressively on a road course or something where you got to do a lot of shifting coming in and out of corners, it'll manage the throttle so you don't have to heel toe, which is frankly pretty difficult for all but the best drivers. So the car does that for you, but you can turn that off so you can still drive traditionally, because some people find it annoying. Some people are enjoying, it's way more fun to drive a stick shift, so they want to do it themselves, even if they're not good at it.
I heard it's way more fun.
So in a swap situation, we're missing a lot of stuff. We don't have the body module. We don't have the instrument panel display. We don't have the switches on the steering column. So I was digging around, calling our friends at the local Chevy dealer, getting wiring diagrams. They wouldn't let us drive one, but they had a Z06 Corvette up on the lot, but it was an automatic. But,
yeah, we're like, we just need to bring this to the rev limiter a bunch of times and,
right.
and data log with
data.
our aftermarket box here. Come on.
And we were, I even reached out to some friends I have through some local car clubs, and I couldn't find anybody with a manual Z06 that would let us even let them drive and us just record what's happening to try and compare any notes. So we ultimately, I found a solution in the tune, which was it was intuitive, but a long way around an arc to get there, if that makes any sort of sense. And I guess the best way to put it is I thought a little backwards to earlier generation systems, and they didn't have active rev match, but the data that's available for the ECM to make other decisions, primarily for heads-up displays on LS-powered performance cars like your Camaros and Corvettes, it's calculating a lot of data, which is actually read by sensors in the newer cars. So that's where I kind of went down a path that I don't think many people have probably thought of to go down so far. And technically, what I did is something you wouldn't normally do in a tune to fix it.
Yeah.
And then as far as other people not really noticing this yet, even though probably half the cars we have in the shop are stick shifts, and I mean, there's a Chevelle in here right now getting an automatic taken out and a stick shift put in. Stick shifts, unfortunately, aren't as popular as they were, especially in super high power cars, because as fun as it is, it's harder and harder to use all the power in a stick shift car. So more and more of these high power cars are becoming automatics. And I'm thinking in the automatics, in a swap situation, the transmission shifts up as soon as you let off the gas. So that dampens it. Because if you, in the car we're talking about, if you step on the clutch it does this. But if you just take your foot off the gas, there's just the briefest moment, which you really have to look for when you're driving it. And you can see it in the data where it doesn't close the throttle right away compared to what your foot does, but you can't feel it because of the way the car's there.
Sure.
So I think the automatic cars and the number of automatics versus manuals are probably masking this problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it took you to be, challenged and, for lack of a better term, kind of obsessive over wanting to get this right. To come up with ways to look at this data and think about it and then figure it out, which I think is pretty cool. And we have a lot of people in our business that do think that way, that are up in the middle of the night thinking about, how do these panels go together to where I can disconnect them and, weld new ones in, or how can I, repaint this car in a certain number of steps to where we don't have any tape lines or overage or whatever, or in your case, how do I get this computer to do what I need it to do? And I think that, again, is a big difference between our shop and some others, where a lot of people would be like, what do you mean? What's wrong with it? Call the tech line and look at the manual or whatever and be done with it. And some people just don't have the luxury of being able to put that kind of time into it. We're very fortunate that the owner of this car kind of hung with us on this because he wanted it right too. But we didn't have any idea how long it was going to take. And thankfully he was cool with it, because the end result, the car screams. It's awesome.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, and I feel the need to clarify is that not to say that we're the best in the world at this, but we really went around and talked to everybody who's anybody with regards to this late model tuning stuff, and we got answers from "you're crazy, there's something wrong with your car" to "we don't have a problem" to "I don't know how to help you." So.
Or try this, or we figured it out also, and we think it's this, and it wasn't. We tried all those other suggested fixes. You're right. I don't mean to sound like, I'm being arrogant about this, because there were so many steps along the way. This process took us months, but we went to the top, to the manufacturers, and then down to different tuners and racers and everything else, and it was pretty amazing the wide breadth of feedback we were getting. Everything Trevor said plus more. And then as soon as we kind of figured it out, then we offered to those who helped us to turn around and help them with their situations. And we did end up helping a shop on the West Coast in that same respect, with fixing theirs too. So it is a community event. You got to be a good member of the automotive aftermarket community. But a lot of times people don't get it. They don't have any idea what it takes just to do something that seems simple.
Yeah, because it seems simple, yet is not.
If you do it right.
Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Mike, as soon as I figured it out, I was upset at how simple it was to fix it once I found it.
Yeah, right? You're like, why didn't I think of this sooner? What's the matter with me?
Yeah, here's Trevor, all, as Kelly says, mopey gropey sitting at the lunch table. What's the matter? I fixed it. Why are you upset? This took so damn long.
They didn't fix it last month, that's why.
Right, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That's a real feather in your cap to figure that out. That's amazing. I remember Kevin and I talking about that a while ago, and that being an issue. And I was, every time I would talk to him, like, is this LT4 thing fixed yet? No, not yet. And when the time it finally was, he was so happy. He's like, "Oh, you'll never believe what Trevor found out on this thing. It's amazing." So that was really exciting for me to kind of follow along that process.
And I think a little of that got left into the Hemming story.
Did it?
Yeah, there's like 2 lines about it, which when they were interviewing me for my portion of the story, they're asking all sorts of questions, and then I'm just answering questions, and Kevin overhears me on the phone. He's like, I hope they write that okay, because I don't want that to come off the wrong way. But they did it justice, and they didn't make it the whole story. It's probably 2, maybe 3 sentences about it.
Yeah, and that's really all it needs to be to the rest of the world, But internally, it was a bit of an odyssey.
Yeah.
For sure. So I know we're we're going, kind of deep into our show here. But before we get to the trivia questions that everybody's waiting to hear, Trevor, give us the rundown of the stable at this point, because a lot of times people ask us, being and working in a hot rod shop, what kind of cars do you have? So tell us what you got now, because you've got a pretty good variety of stuff.
Well, between my wife Tricia and I, we have 6 cars.
Nice.
Tricia daily drives a Dodge Dart, although not now because she's working from home, so it's sitting in the driveway.
And a modern Dart.
Yeah, a modern economy car, a Fiat in a Dodge suit.
Mm-hmm.
Not a 68 Hemi Dart.
No, nothing like that. It's a rather depressing little car, unfortunately. But it does what it's supposed to do. It's cheap and gets her where she needs to go and all that.
That's a win.
And then she also, in order to feel more fair at home, claimed the beater S10. We have a really beat up 98 S10 that does homeowner type duties, picking up mulch, going to Home Depot, stuff like that. It is.
She likes that truck.
She does. It's a 5-speed. She kind of knew how to drive stick shift before we had it, but nobody ever taught her in a reasonable method. She got the "you're burning my clutch, what are you doing" type of treatment, trying to learn from her brother. So she had concept but didn't have any finesse to it, I guess the best way to say that. So she kind of latched onto that so that she could have 2 cars. And then I have 4. So most of the time I drive to work a supercharged 97 Buick Riviera, which it's my beater car. It's pretty rough for what it is. But I kind of always wanted one of those. Growing up in the 90s, those cars were really different at the time. Looking back now, it looks like a 90s car, but they felt very different back then. And of course, with the supercharger, it's 240 horsepower, which even by today's standards for a full-size car isn't nothing. So the thing gets out of its own way. In fact, Tricia gets mad that it's faster than her car. And because it's a luxury car, it has more features than her car has. It's a relatively new car, like a heated seat and mirrors that tilt down when you back up, and dual zone climate control and stuff stuff that we take for granted in everything now, but it's still not really.
I like those, and yours is cool because you bought it because it had a bad wheel bearing or something, and they were just bailing out of the car. Was that the deal?
Yeah, I needed a new daily driver because I bought my ZL1. We'll get to that in a moment. But I was driving home from somewhere, and Tricia was in the passenger seat looking at stuff for sale on Facebook, and she's like, "What do you think of this?" And it's $1,500 for a 97 Riviera with 150,000 miles on it.
Sold.
And my first question was, "Is it a supercharged one?" And she says, "Yes." And I said, "Well, let's find out if it's still available."
Yeah.
And then, it had a wheel bearing that was so bad, it was almost an indescribable level of wheel bearing noise. Probably shouldn't have really driven it home, but I did. And I put a wheel bearing in it, and it's had a few fixes here and there over the 3 years I've had it, but I really like it, even though it's a beater and not in the best shape.
It's a cool car.
And then, since we mentioned my ZL1, I have a 2012 Camaro ZL1, which is in a reasonably long line of modern performance cars I've had so far. I picked it not so much because I'm a Camaro fanatic, more because it met all the check boxes I was looking for, because I wanted a GM because of the cost versus performance and the parts availability. I wanted something supercharged. I wanted a stick shift because it's way more fun.
Amen.
And I obviously rear-wheel drive with all that. So I initially had wanted a second generation CTS-V because I had a first generation that I really liked.
That Mike test drove for you.
That Mike
sure
did test
did.
drive for me before I bought it.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun car. Woo-wee.
It was. The problem with it is it wasn't ever fast enough, so I kept messing with it. And then it got to the point where I changed the oil once, and there's some things in the oil that I didn't like some springs off some valve stem seals.
Oh, wow. Yikes.
Which I probably, I could have fixed, but I'm like, you know what? You can just go down the road and I'll buy something that is fast enough I don't feel the need to mess with it all the time.
Yeah, because you were going to end up putting a motor in it and the whole thing.
Yeah, because I drag raced that car and all sorts of stuff.
You drag raced it too?
I did.
Because I drag raced it when I test drove it.
Right before that oil change.
Pretty much.
I was nice to it. I drove it around the block.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
No, I was good.
Yeah, and then incidentally, I was worried that we might need more than valve stem seals, and I saw it for sale again with another 20,000 miles on it, and exactly the same spec sheet I had given to the guy I sold it to. So you know how that goes. If I had kept it, it would have needed more than valve stem seals. But since I didn't, it's apparently still as of a year ago, it was still ticking.
Ticking being the operative
Right,
word.
you're right. It's literally ticking.
Well, and the other thing that I didn't like about it, which is one of the things that is not great about LSs, is the early LSs, the Gen 3 engines, are known for piston slap, which without getting too scientific, the piston design, which is part of the secret of the power, makes some noise when they get a little wear on them, especially when cold. And that car, for as few miles were on it, was pretty bad. It sounded like a diesel truck on a cold morning. So,
Oof.
and they'll run forever like that. But it's kind of embarrassing. Seems like you got this nice car that you've abused. So,
Yep.
anyway, so back to my Camaro. I bought that to fill check boxes, and I just didn't want to pay the Cadillac tax again. So I ended up with the Camaro, which I've come to really like. It's probably my favorite car I've ever owned as far as from the driver's seat, because it's a good balance of more power than it necessarily needs, and I'll use the word needs lightly because there's no such thing as too much power when you're a car guy. But it handles well, it stops well, it's reasonably comfortable, but you have to respect it, and I think that's why I like it, because the car I had between the Cadillac and it was a 5th gen Corvette, which in all sorts of ways was perfect. Like, it had just the right amount of power that obviously you can ball one up, but if you have any clue how to drive, you're not going to. It handled great, it stopped great, it got 30 miles to the gallon out on the highway. As long as you didn't need to carry any more than one person, it had tons of room in the hatchback. To me, it didn't have a lot of personality. Where the Camaro has more personality, because it's got more power than you could always use. I think is a lot of it. Also, Trisha didn't like the Corvette because 5th gen Corvettes have kind of a stigma about the type of person that drives them. and even though, and I don't know if it was all in my head because she felt that way, or if it's in my head too, because we'll be honest, we've seen some of the people that drive a 5th gen Corvette. So I got the feeling that people would see me in it and they'd be like, "Why do you have your dad's car?" Even though it was worth half of what my Camaro is worth. Nobody looks at me in my Camaro is like, "Oh, you took your dad's car out for the weekend, huh?" So,
yeah, it's a different demographic. Plus, I remember Trisha complaining to me about all that money you were spending on chest shampoo. It's kind of like beard wax,
Right.
I think it was actually Corvette brand.
Well, they sell it at every drugstore and the museum, so why not?
Right. And at this point, I apologize to the Corvette guys. It's a joke.
So we have 2 more cars to cover. I also have a 81 El Camino that is kind of rare. It's also pretty beat. It's an SS with a 4-speed. And unfortunately, I've not been able to find reliable numbers on how many were made. I've seen everything from a couple dozen to a couple hundred. Either way, it's pretty rare. And my stepdad basically gave that to me as a wedding present because he was tired of seeing it sit around and getting worn just from sitting. So it's in dire need of an interior and a paint job. But it runs and drives. And I drive it to work once in a while. Mm-hmm. And then lastly is my 68 Chevy pickup, which I got to give Kevin some credit for. I had a 67 Chevy pickup which was my first LS swap when I first started here at the shop. But it was one of those ready for paint vehicles that we see them for sale all the time. And
ready for rebody.
Yeah.
Right. So it had primer on it, and I knew that it wasn't the best stuff under there, but again, I was working on this truck, basically in my college days, so I didn't have a lot of money. So I shot a coat of paint on it. I drove that thing 50,000 miles. In fact, I daily drove it for a while my beater at that time was broken down. That incidentally happened right when we moved from the farm shop to the current shop, because my beater was broken down at the farm shop for like 6 months.
Oh, boy.
Surprised Fritz didn't burn it.
Yeah. Well, and then, as fate would have it, your replacement truck was a derelict in the back of the shop building we were moving into.
It was. So I was looking for a truck that was a lot less rust-free. I was basically going to do a body swap, take my chassis and out from under the red truck and put under a new body restored body that didn't have the bunch of rust problems. And then one day we were talking about this at the shop, and Kevin's like, you know what you should do? We've talked about all these cars we wish we could build and we had customers for. Do the SS pickup. So instead of fixing some minor rust problems and painting a truck red and then swapping a body and having the same truck, I was cutting a truck in half and making it a short bed.
Jeez.
Yes, sorry. But it is cool.
It is really cool.
Leaning tailgates forward.
Yeah.
So
a little spoiler on it.
Yeah, it's got to kind of paint a picture for the listeners, is it's got a lot of first generation Camaro inspired things, because my thought process that Kevin kind of fostered is like trying to make this something that GM might have actually made in the muscle car era. So I cut the center section out of the middle of a Camaro SS hood. So the whole hood profile has got the power bulge off of a Camaro with the ice cube trays. The truck has a square peak on the hood originally, so I've got the triangular peak on the hood off the Camaro.
Cool.
I bought aftermarket roll pans and put on each end, and I took 4 68 Camaro bumpers and modified them to be wider and fit the profile of the truck. I leaned the tailgate forward, and in that process, I also made the top of the bed is the correct length for a short bed, so like standard tonneau covers and stuff would fit. But a bottom of the bed's actually 4 inches longer, so the rear overhang's longer, which to me I think was one of the best things I did to the truck, because I always thought that the back overhang on the short beds of those trucks is a little too short. Like the wheels just look a little too far back.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, the bed proportions are a lot better. And then on top of the tailgate, I took a 69 Camaro spoiler and I set up there to use as a silhouette for a steel spoiler that I made out of, I made a wire frame, and then I hammered out sheet metal to fit basically on a panel bag. As I was doing this in my own garage, which was 2 hours from work, so I wasn't able to use all the shop equipment. So panel bag and a hammer is how I formed the spoiler. And then the only place where I would say I'm disappointed on the theme, but I drive the thing a lot, it's got 30,000 miles on it, is it's LS powered. It's got a lowly little 4.8 that I paid $500 for, and it did 80,000 miles in somebody's truck before it got wrecked. It did 50,000 miles in my 67, and it's done another 30,000 in my 68. And I've had to put a water pump on it and an intake gasket.
And right there, my friend, is why LSs are swap monsters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and not only that, so this truck, it's a 68 C10, and it's got a 373 gear, right?
Yeah, 373 gear, 4L60 transmission in it.
And you've actually drag raced this thing with 26 million miles on the motor on a 4.8.
I have. It's by no means fast. It runs about a 14.3, which is...
How about that?
That's nothing to sneeze at.
1430 is like, it's like SS 396 Chevelle specs on bias plots.
Totally. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have any future plans for it?
Well, I'm pretty sure, speaking of 4L60s, that the one that's in it is like 6 inches from death, because coming down to a stop. Sometimes it downshifts kind of weird. And if it sits for a long time, it takes it a minute to pump up and get pressure and shift, especially when it's cold out. So I have a 4L60 core sitting on the garage floor at home, but that $1,000 feels better in my pocket than in a transmission until I absolutely need it.
Right on.
Yeah.
And then if time, effort, and money were no object, as much as I like the comfort and convenience of the LS, really to fit the theme all the way together, it should have a big block in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Couldn't agree more.
Maybe someday a compromise would be to buy some of the traditional looking parts and put on the LS, the fake big block valve covers, put a carbureted style intake on it, and put a throttle body injection system. At least make it look a little more appropriate, because right now you open the hood, it looks like a 02 Chevy pickup that the engine came out of.
Yeah. But overall, it's a great truck. I dig it a lot.
Yeah, I dig it too. I remember seeing some build pictures of it. I'm like, wow, this Trevor guy really knows what he's doing.
You got to see it at his wedding.
I did get to see it at his wedding, and that's also is when I learned about his true first name.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've come full circle, which is good. Because I can hear everybody. They're panting. They want to know the answer to our trivia question. So, first of all, how do we do this? So this was a 3-way deal, and our guest went first. So Trevor, you were the guest. Let's have you reveal the correct answers to your trivia question, which I'm pretty confident Mike and I both got wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kevin, you were close. So Cord was correct as far as the manufacturer. So
nice.
Yardley, that's 1 point. The year, however, was wrong. 1929 Cord was the first front-wheel drive American car.
Wow.
And then the bonus was that Ford was the first to have hidden headlights in the United States. That was the 36/37 coffin nose Ford. So
Gosh,
Kevin was right in the ballpark.
Kevin's right on the money. Gosh dang it.
No.
Nice.
Well, that
He's
makes
right
you feel
there.
a little better. So, of course, Mike guessed the old Tornado Cadillac front drive.
Yeah.
The trivia question on the Tornado is that the front-wheel drive Tornado platform was supposed to be called the Olds Holiday.
Really?
Yeah, and it's a name they've used since the 50s.
Huh.
On and off, like the Holiday Coupes, and
Yeah.
even like a 70 Cutlass. One of those is a Holiday.
Oh,
But,
interesting.
Yeah, not really, but it
Okay.
came up. It's contextual, so there it is. All right, so Mikey, your turn.
All right, so I asked you guys, why does GDI injection require so much higher fuel pressure than tune port injection? And Trevor went first, and he said that because of gasoline being injected directly into the cylinders, where you're typically on the compression stroke for that motor, the cylinder pressures are so much higher, it requires a higher fuel pressure to atomize the fuel. And you agreed with Trevor, and ding, 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 you're both right. Congratulations.
I was right to just agree with him.
Yes.
You sound so disappointed, Mike.
No, I'm elated. I knew you guys were going to get it. I knew it was an easy question, but I like the question anyway.
It is a good one. And it's an interesting topic for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, that leaves mine. And I said there's been several family-owned and sibling-owned car companies over the years, and a couple of which had brothers, 2 brothers, and one had 3. And Mike said the Dodge brothers for the 2 brother, and that is correct.
Hey, look at me.
Absolutely, right on. And the bonus was the 3, and you said the infamous Flying Tucker brothers.
Yardley, take that point back off.
Who I've yet to meet. Maybe they're out there, and maybe they build cars. I don't know. Preston, Heston, and Timmy, I think.
Yeah. Preston, Heston, and Lou.
Right. But I think that was a bonus, so I think you're clear on that. So we'll call it a win. Trevor, said the Graham brothers. Of course, he knows his Graham vehicles. Of course, the Graham Page Motor Car Company was run by 3 individuals: Joseph, Robert, and Ray Graham. So that is correct.
How
Mr.
about
Trevor.
that?
Yeah.
Nicely done, Trevor.
Yeah. Well, I knew he knew a lot about those, so I was thinking he might picked up. I think he was going to pick up on it, but not quite that fast, because he just went right to the.
He did. I mean, he
right
just
to
bypassed the low-hanging fruit of the Dodge brothers and went straight for the Graham. Very nice.
Right.
Nicely
and then
done.
For the 2, Fred and August Duesenberg, yes, that is also correct, and that was my backup. But I was thinking, both Dodge would have been the easier one. So it's kind of a letdown, because I did have a couple other Graham trivia questions that I could have pulled out here.
Oh, jeez.
That
Do you not hurt me enough? Do you not hurt me enough?
I'm trying to make this fun for the whole family,
Okay.
and that's why I had the 2 with the Dodge brothers.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
But just so Trevor, he did point out that the Graham boys were modifying Dodge trucks that became the Dodge pickup truck. Here's a couple for you that I don't think you know this one, Trevor. I'm going to throw it out there, though.
All right.
What was the last year that the Graham Page Company was on the books as a legitimate company?
Oh, well, year. I'm going to say I don't know the year for sure. As I understand it, and it's convoluted, so we'll try not to get too deep into my knowledge of this. Graham continued to make cars actually quite a long time, but not under their own name. They were involved in Kaiser Frazer and Henry J, and ultimately have been diluted down to be, in some fashion, became Jeep. That's the shortest story on that. But the Graham brothers cashed out of the cars, and they went on to be an investment firm. And I do know that they owned Madison Square Gardens for a while, but I don't know at what point the company name may have changed from being Graham Page to something else.
Aha. Well, that Madison Square Gardens was going to be my other Graham trivia question, because I did find that out. But interestingly enough, the Graham assets were acquired by Kaiser Frazer, and the name Graham Page continued until 1962 within the archives of Chrysler.
So there you go. When I said it ultimately became a Jeep, that definitely was not far off.
Nope.
No,
But that Jeep
right.
didn't become part of Chrysler until the 80s.
Right.
So I don't know
It's
how
all
Chrysler
very,
got hold of that earlier, but
it's all very incestuous. So, well, right on. That's more about Grahams than any other 3 listeners wanted to know. But they're cool cars. So at that, I'm going to say to Trevor, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Mike, thanks for suggesting Trevor as a guest.
You bet.
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thanks for coming on, Trev.
Yeah. I'd do it again.
Right on. Yeah. Well, I hope it wasn't weird being on the other side of the microphone for this one. Now when you mow your lawn, are you going to listen to yourself?
I might, although I do have to say, even though I listen to, I watch episodes of the show, listening to yourself is something that I find hard to get over, because I think everybody who's listened to a recording themselves knows that you don't sound in your head the same way you actually sound. So it's always, it's weird for me. I'm sure it's weird for a lot of people. I know Kevin's pretty used to it with all the TV stuff, listening to himself on playbacks, but I don't know. I'll try. The mower drowns some things out. Maybe it'll drown out my nasally drawl.
It isn't going to drown out your correct trivia questions, though.
No, it is not. Right on.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody listening to this episode of V8 Radio. Again, I don't know why I say this at the end. If you've already heard this, so you know where you can listen to it. But maybe there's better places. Maybe if you're listening on Podbean, you might find it better on TuneIn Radio. I don't know. Maybe all the Stitcher FM people would switch over to Google Play or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Player FM or iHeartRadio or the v8radio.com site. I don't know. It's up to you. Like I said last time, listen where it's least, hassle. make it easy on yourself. We appreciate it. Subscribe if you can. And for Mr. Trevor Spence and Mr. Mike Huball Clarke, I'm Kevin Oeste, reminding you to keep the shiny side under 100, and we will see you next time on VA Radio.